No one imagined that the millionaire George would awaken from the coma, least of all the young cleaning lady Teresa, who secretly sought solace in his presence. But when his eyes finally open, what happens between them triggers a twist so unexpected that neither of them could have ever predicted it. What awaits them now? Hello, my friends. I am Linda, and this is Linda's Love Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. Teresa hummed softly while she wiped the shiny hospital floor with a damp cloth. The smell of disinfectant filled the air, but it didn't dampen her good mood. With a smile on her face, she greeted patients and staff who passed by, radiating a contagious joy that seemed to illuminate the white and aseptic corridors. Born in a distant country, Teresa had arrived in that foreign land full of dreams and hopes. Despite the challenges she faced as an immigrant, she maintained the optimism and willpower that defined her. Her heavy accent and spontaneous manner soon captivated her co-workers, who admired her resilience and constant good spirits. That morning, Teresa was particularly excited. It was time for her lunch break, the moment of the day she appreciated the most. While other employees crowded into the noisy cafeteria, she preferred a quieter spot to enjoy her snack and relax a little. With light steps, Teresa headed to room 307. There, lying in a state-of-the-art hospital bed, was George Thompson, the young millionaire who had been in a deep coma for months. Teresa knew little about him, only what she had heard in the corridors, that he had suffered a severe accident while skiing at a luxury resort and had been rushed to that renowned hospital. The spacious private room contrasted with the others. Tastefully decorated, it even had a comfortable sofa bed for companions. Teresa found it ironic that such a cosy space remained empty most of the time. Visits to George had become increasingly rare as the months went by. "Good morning, Mr. George," Teresa greeted cheerfully as she entered, as if the patient could hear her. "I hope you don't mind my company for lunch today." She settled into the soft sofa, sighing with satisfaction. She took a sandwich and a bottle of water out of her bag, placing them on the bedside table. Then she picked up her cell phone and put on some soft music to play. "Ah, how I love this song," she exclaimed, nodding her head to the rhythm of the melody. "You know, Mr. George, sometimes I wonder if you can hear us. It must be so lonely staying here all the time in silence." Teresa took a bite of her sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. Her eyes rested on George's serene and immobile face. He was a handsome man, with masculine features and dark hair carefully styled by the nurses. "Coma is something fascinating, don't you think?" she continued between bites. "No one really knows what goes on in the mind of someone in that state. Some say the person is completely unconscious, like in a deep sleep. Others believe they can perceive everything around them, hear voices, feel touches." Teresa shrugged, taking a sip of water. "Well, anyway, I thought you might like some company and music. It can't be any fun staying here alone all day." She finished her snack, brushing the crumbs off her clothes. She looked at the clock and saw that she still had a few minutes before going back to work. She leaned back comfortably on the couch, letting the music carry her thoughts away. "Oh, I almost forgot to tell you today's gossip," Teresa suddenly exclaimed, leaning closer to the bed as if to share a secret. Nurse Patricia finally agreed to go out with Dr. Martinez. Everyone knew he was crazy about her, but Patricia always found a way to avoid it. It seems that yesterday he surprised her with a huge bouquet of red roses. It was so romantic that she couldn't resist. Teresa laughed, shaking her head. "I bet you must think it's silly for me to be here gossiping about other people's lives. But what can I do? I love a good love story. And let's be honest, a bit of romance is always welcome to brighten up this hospital environment, don't you think?" She looked again at George's impassive face, wondering if somewhere in his mind he was listening and enjoying her stories. Teresa liked to think that he was, that somehow her company and good humour brought a little comfort to this man trapped in his own body. The alarm on her phone went off, indicating that it was time to get back to work. Teresa stood up, adjusting her uniform. "Well, Mr. George, it was a pleasure having lunch with you today. I'll be back tomorrow to tell you the latest news, okay?" She gathered her belongings and walked to the door. Before leaving, She cast one last look at the sleeping patient. "Sleep well, Mr. George. And don't worry, soon enough you'll wake up and we can have a real conversation." With a smile on her lips, Teresa left the room, leaving behind only the echo of her contagious laughter and the subtle fragrance of her cheap perfume. If she could see, she would have noticed the almost imperceptible movement of George's fingers on the white sheet. Days went by, and Teresa's routine remained the same. During her lunchtime, she would invariably head to room 307 to keep George company. Those moments had become her refuge, a welcome break from the hectic day-to-day life of the hospital. One afternoon, Teresa entered the room with a worried expression on her face. She sat heavily on the sofa next to the bed, letting out a long sigh. "Oh, Mr. George, today is not an easy day," she confided, running her hand through her hair. "I just received bad news about my visa situation." Teresa grabbed her cell phone and put on speaker mode an audio message she had received earlier. "Hello, Teresa. This is Mr. Ramirez, your immigration attorney. Unfortunately, I have to inform you that your application for permanent residency has been denied. Apparently, your current income is not considered sufficient to prove that you can support yourself in the country without government assistance. We have 30 days to file an appeal, but honestly, the chances are not good. Call me as soon as you can so we can discuss the options." Teresa turned off her cell phone, feeling tears well up in her eyes. "Do you understand what this means, Mr. George?" she asked, her voice choked with emotion. "I might have to go back to my home country, but I have no one there anymore. No family, no place to go." She wiped away a tear that was rolling down her cheek, trying to regain her composure. "Sorry for being here crying like this. I know you have much bigger problems to worry about. It's just that sometimes it's hard to stay optimistic, you know. I came here with so many dreams, so much hope. I worked hard, saving every penny. But it seems it's never enough." Teresa remained silent for a few moments, lost in her thoughts. Then, as if she suddenly remembered where she was, she forced a smile. "But, hey, let's not sit here lamenting, shall we? Life goes on, and I'm sure a solution will come up. It always does, doesn't it?" She got up and walked to the window to open the curtains and let in some sunlight. Teresa returned to the bedside, absent-mindedly straightening George's sheets and pillow. "You know what? I think the two of us need a bit of excitement today. How about some music to lift our spirits?" She took out her phone and played a cheerful and danceable song. Soon, she was humming and moving to the rhythm of the music, as if she didn't have a care in the world. "Come on, Mr. George. I know you're in there listening to me. Dance with me, even if it's just in your mind." Teresa continued dancing and singing, her infectious energy filling the room. For a brief moment, she almost could have sworn she saw a slight smile on George's lips. But surely it was just her fertile imagination, she thought. One night, Teresa was facing a personal dilemma. The owner of the small apartment where she lived had decided to sell the property, giving her only a week to move out. With her tight salary and the uncertain situation of her visa, she couldn't find a new place to rent. Walking through the silent hospital corridors during her night shift, a bold and potentially dangerous idea came to her mind. George's room was spacious and rarely received visitors, especially during the early hours. The comfortable sofa bed remained empty every night. So that very night, Teresa put her plan into action. She waited for the right moment, when she knew the nurse's rounds were less frequent, and stealthily entered room 307 with a small backpack containing some clothes and personal items. "Good evening, Mr. George," she whispered, feeling both nervous and excited about her little adventure. "I hope you don't mind sharing your room with me for a few days. I promise I'll be a quiet and discreet guest." Teresa transformed the sofa into a comfortable bed, settling under a light blanket she had brought. Before lying down, she approached George's bed. "Thank you for taking me in, even though you can't say anything," she said softly, lightly touching the patient's hand. In the days that followed, Teresa established a careful routine. She arrived late at night after her shift and left very early in the morning before the hospital became busy. She was meticulous in not leaving any traces of her presence, always tidying everything up perfectly before departing. What Teresa did not notice as she fell asleep was the slight movement of George's fingers, as if he wanted to reach out to her and say that he was hearing every word. One particularly difficult night, Teresa entered room 307 with tears in her eyes. She sat on the edge of George's bed, seeking the silent comfort that his presence always provided her. "Oh, Mr. George," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I think the time has come to say goodbye. My time is running out, and I couldn't find a way out. Tomorrow will be my last day in the hospital." Teresa wiped her tears, trying to smile despite the sadness. She remained silent for a few moments, just observing George's serene face. Then, on an impulse, she took his hand in hers. At that moment, something extraordinary happened. George's fingers moved slightly, squeezing Teresa's hand almost imperceptibly. His eyes, closed for so long, began to twitch beneath his eyelids. Teresa held her breath, barely believing what she was seeing. Slowly, with evident effort, George's eyes opened. His gaze, initially unfocused, gradually settled on Teresa's face. "You," George whispered, his voice hoarse from disuse. "You are here?" Teresa felt her heart race. Tears of emotion and surprise streamed down her face. "Yes, I am here," she answered softly. "Welcome back, Mr. George." With trembling hands, Teresa pressed the nurse call button. Within moments, the room was flooded with a medical team, all marvelling at the miracle they were witnessing. As the doctors examined George and asked questions, Teresa quietly gathered her things, preparing to leave. Her heart was torn between the joy of George's awakening and the sadness of knowing that this would be her last moment there. Before she could leave the room, however, she was approached by the head nurse. "Teresa, we need to talk," he said, his tone serious. "We've discovered that you've been sleeping here in the hospital, in the patient's room. This is a severe violation of our policies. I'm sorry, but we will have to terminate your contract immediately." Teresa felt as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet. She knew she was in the wrong, but the reality of being fired hit her like a punch in the stomach. With tears in her eyes, she just nodded, unable to find words to defend herself. Grabbing her backpack, Teresa cast one last glance at George, who was surrounded by doctors and nurses. For a brief moment, their eyes met. She tried to smile, wanting to convey all the joy she felt at seeing him awake, but the sadness of her own situation made the gesture difficult. In the days that followed, the hospital buzzed with news of George Thompson's miraculous awakening. The local press didn't take long to appear, eager to cover the story of the millionaire who had returned to life after months in a coma. Amidst all this turmoil, George felt strangely empty. Something was missing, a presence he couldn't name, but whose absence was painfully felt. The voices around him seemed distant and unimportant compared to that cheerful and comforting voice that had accompanied him during his deep sleep. One afternoon, exhausted from the constant visits and demands, George asked for a moment alone. When he finally found himself alone in the room, he called for a nurse. "Please," he asked, his voice still weak, "where is the woman who stayed with me every day? The one who was here when I woke up?" The nurse hesitated, looking uncomfortable. "I'm very sorry, Mr. Thompson. Teresa was a cleaning staff member. She was fired for breaking hospital rules by sleeping in your room without authorization." George felt a wave of shock and sadness. So it had not been a dream. The gentle voice, the contagious laughter, the comforting stories, it was all real. "I need to find her," he said. "Please call my personal assistant immediately." Teresa was about to leave the country, with nowhere to go, when she received an unexpected call. "Hello, Teresa. This is George Thompson. I would really like to talk to you." Teresa's heart raced. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. The next day, Teresa once again found herself in front of the imposing facade of the hospital, her stomach a knot of nervousness and anticipation. She was led to a private office where George was waiting for her. When the door opened, Teresa's eyes filled with tears. There was George, sitting in a wheelchair, but much more alert and vibrant than she had ever seen him. His smile was warm and his eyes shone with an emotion she could not decipher. "Teresa," he said softly, "we finally meet for real." Teresa couldn't contain her laughter mixed with tears of emotion. "Mr. George, you are so awake." George laughed as well, a rich and pleasant sound that Teresa had never heard before. "All thanks to you, Teresa. You were my light in the darkness, my anchor when I was lost. Every word of yours, every laugh, every song, all of that kept me connected to the world." Teresa blushed, not knowing how to react to such words. "Teresa, I know about your situation. I know you are about to be deported, that you lost your job." George reached out, taking Teresa's hand in his. "I would like to offer you a job, as my personal assistant. I need someone to help me during my recovery, someone I can trust, and I can't think of anyone better than you." Teresa was left speechless, barely able to process what she was hearing. But I'm just a cleaner. I don't have the qualifications to—" George interrupted her gently. "You have all the qualifications that matter, Teresa. Compassion, joy, strength of spirit. The rest we can learn together." Tears were now freely running down Teresa's face. I don't know what to say. This is like a dream." George smiled, gently squeezing her hand. "Say that you accept. Say that you will stay and help me rediscover life, because I have a feeling that we still have many conversations ahead of us." Teresa laughed through her tears, feeling as if a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "Yes, I accept. Thank you, Mr. George. Thank you for everything." George nodded, his gaze full of affection. The months that followed were a period of intense adaptation for both of them. Teresa, now with her work visa guaranteed thanks to her new job, dove headfirst into her new responsibilities. She accompanied George to his physical therapy sessions, organised his schedule, took care of his diet, and most importantly, continued to be that joyful and comforting presence that had helped him so much during his coma. As time went by, the relationship between the two subtly transformed. Their glances began to linger a bit longer. Their smiles took on new meanings, and casual touches started to carry a previously non-existent electricity. "Do you remember the first time you came into my room for lunch?" George asked, his eyes shining with the memory. Teresa laughed, blushing slightly. "How could I forget? I was so nervous thinking that someone would catch me at any moment." "And yet you kept coming back," George observed, his voice gentle. "Day after day, bringing your joy, your stories, your music." He paused, his gaze becoming more intense. "You know, Teresa, during all that time when I was lost in the darkness, your voice was like a beacon. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, but I could feel your presence. It was as if you were holding my hand, guiding me back to life." Teresa felt her heart race at George's words. She reached out, gently touching his arm. As the afternoon sun bathed the garden in its golden light, George and Teresa remained there, hands held, hearts open, ready to explore the unexpected love that had blossomed between them. Together, they discovered that the true miracle was not just in George's physical awakening, but in the awakening of their hearts to love and the possibility of a shared future. As they walked back to the hospital, hand in hand and hearts light, both George and Teresa knew that their journey was only beginning. There would be challenges ahead, of course, cultural differences to navigate, prejudices to overcome, a world of business to reconcile with their budding love. But with the strength they had found in each other, and the lesson of resilience and hope that their story represented, they were ready to face any obstacle. Because now they knew that sometimes the greatest miracle of all is simply to be present, to listen, and to bring light into someone's life. Even when we think no one is listening. If you enjoyed, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment with a number from 1 to 5 to let us know how much you liked the story. Also, watch the video that is currently on your screen. See you soon.